Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Cadence Independent Media Production. Today, we are delving into a subject that we kind of started off on a little while back, which was issues with tom sound, what's messing with your tom sound. Today, we're going to go one step further. What's messing with your snare sound? If you've been keeping up with us even a little bit, you know that we have talked about snare side heads, snare batter heads, snare wires, strings, straps, muffling, different kinds of shells, different numbers of lugs, all of the things with snare drums. What else could we possibly have to talk about? Well, there was a giant looming shadow here that lives in the comment section on these videos, and we read every single comment that goes on every single one of these videos, guaranteed. We sit and stare at them, and this is the one that we feel like we need to address today, which is a little bit less about the drum and the tuning and more about what it means to like the sound that you're making and what it means to go after a sound that you're either hearing in your head or that maybe you heard on a recording. This is going to be a little bit of a playing thing, talking thing, PSA thing, but I feel like, and Ben feels like, this is really crucial and it's holding a lot of people back who don't need necessarily to be struggling with this because it's kind of a perspective thing. Now, just to get out in front of it, if you're in a position where you're thinking, I need, a tuning number, I need a note for this, I need a solution right now to fix my problem, and you're sort of getting ready to bail on this video. I mean, we never say stuff like this here, but this is actually the video that's for you specifically because you can have those things, you can know those things, but that's very separate from being like, I want to get a sound that makes me happy. I can give you notes, we could give you, whatever you want. But the point of this situation is to understand that we're losing track in our minds and our ears of what a drum actually sounds like in music. We know what it sounds like at home when we hit it, but anything on the radio, most anything that you find on the internet, there's too much going on for us to be able to cut through the noise and actually understand what that drum was doing in the first place. Where we kind of landed with this today is that we realized that there's really no such thing as a good sound or a bad sound. There is just sounds that make us happy and work in the music we're making, and sounds that don't work so well or that don't make us as happy. Now, setting aside the idea that this drum sounds good and that one sounds bad, because I don't really believe in that anyway. That's an odd philosophy for people to have. We just like drum sounds here, and we find a use for pretty much all of them. The thing that we're talking about here is expectations. We hear a lot of recorded music, we see a lot of live shows, we play a lot of other people's drums, and it can really get into our head sort of predetermined expectations for what we should be going for, what we should be getting out of the drum, and what the right thing to do is with the sound that the drum is making at a given time. Now, sort of like room number one that we want to go into with this starts from the perspective of listening to music. Some of us like a relatively narrow swath of musical genres or certain bands, and some people are like, I listen to everything. And most of us are somewhere between those two things, is sort of the diagram where it overlaps. And one of the things that we can do as listeners, especially in the era of streaming music and YouTube and everything else, is put ourselves in a position of diversifying our ears in terms of styles, genres, eras, everything else, to understand that A lot of these sounds exist the way they exist because the music around that snare drum defined how it needed to sound. Whether it's a jazz situation, like newer jazz versus big band, or if you're talking about really high speed heavy metal versus slower stuff, sludgy stuff, stoner rock, things like that. These things define these sounds. And again, as we say often, context has everything to do with this. And particularly if we're sitting at home fussing with a snare drum, trying to get a sound that is coming in our heads from a sound that we heard in a mix on a recording or somewhere live versus by itself on your snare drum with nothing else around. So, solution to this, and we're actually going to help you with this, we're going to make a playlist of basically just diverse drum sounds. You can listen to this stuff, and if any of the tracks on there are your favorite and other ones are stuff you would never ever listen to in your life, that's okay. That's not the important part. The important part is to hear a lot of different sounds in a lot of different stylistic contexts, listen to it, understand why that facilitates in an effective way and lays in the mix to make all of the music sound better. Door number 2, recorded sounds versus sounds in front of us. Now, it depends on how much time you've gotten to record yourself and particularly how much opportunity you've had to listen back and compare the recorded sound, maybe pre-production or all the way at the end, to the sound that you literally made in the room. In the world of pop music, radio-ready music, anything that's been through a fair amount of production, you have to understand that that's not a naked snare drum sound. It's never a naked snare drum sound. It's getting a good sound in the room that works with all of the mics, 3 of them, 20 of them, whatever. The board, all the outboard gear, the producer's taste, the artist's taste, your own taste, all mixing together to create a sound that has something to do with how the drum sounded in the room, but also equally how the person hit it. Were they catching the rim or not? Was there moon gel on that take or not? And then everything else that it goes through before it finally gets to the other side of all of the other instruments and the post-production after that, and then mastering, and then you have a sound where you go, man, that snare sound's killing. It's not that snare anymore. Now, the solution to this conundrum is sort of twofold. Number one is don't sweat recorded drum sounds so much and just have fun playing and do whatever. But on the other hand, if recorded drum sounds are something that matter to you and you want to make those sounds, really the best way to get over that hurdle is to figure out a way to record yourself, experiment with it, listen back, make adjustments, discover what it took to make that sound. There's also tons of articles, tons of books, tons of websites that talk about this stuff where you can learn exactly what they did on classic recordings, whether it's the Beatles or whatever. And take that to heart when you are thinking about your acoustic sound in front of you at a gig or at home, or if you're actually getting to make recordings from your home studio, big studio, whatever it is. Just remember that it's not just that drum sounded rad and that's the end. That's the first step in a litany of steps that result in the final product. Now, I wanted to mention one more thing here, and actually this comes from my partner Ben here. He spends a lot of time working with social media, working with musicians, and studying the way that music lives in marketing and social media. And this brings us to a complicated subject, which is if you're listening to solo drums on Instagram or Facebook, or maybe even YouTube, depending on how they're doing it, and getting that sound in your ears, it's worth noting that because of the way that the internet works, just like the way that posting stuff works, there's compression and EQing and different things that happen automatically to things that you post that you have no control over. So even if those solo drums that were mixed to be solo drums by themselves with no context, which is not how you would mix drums in a recording with other instruments anyway, there's a degree of other stuff happening to them by the time they get to your earbuds or, the speakers on your phone. That's a thing too, that is out of the hands of the person that's posting it. So even if they spend a ton of time on their drum sound, it's still getting messed with before it gets to you. And you're going to hear that and go, wow, those drums sound amazing, if they do. And there's even more things in between you and what those drums actually sounded like than before. It's crucial to mention that in these situations, because it is a drums forward listening scenario, there's a lot of extra compression and EQing and all sorts of extra post-production to basically just drive home that this video is about drums. This audio is about drums. And it's getting us even further away from what it means to tune a floor tom nicely and enjoy that sound, or go after a snare drum sound that makes you happy when you're practicing in your house. It's it can be far away from actual music making and getting into the realm of just like, how many clicks can this thing get because it's louder than this other video. Now, this is a little bit more complicated of an issue to kind of solve, but what we mean to say here is to seek out music where you can at the very least trust that what you're hearing was the artist's intent, and if you can, try to find music that you can fairly verify wasn't produced to the nth degree. It might mean going back to things from the 60s and 70s, or going back to things from the 90s where they were fairly produced, but you were still hearing largely acoustic sounds from like rock records and things like that, and pop records as well. But start to train your ears to hear what it sounds like when something is just brick wall compressed. Try to hear what it sounds like when the cymbals are allowed to breathe and when there's a little bit of ring in the snare drum maybe, or not. These are all fine, but getting our ears back to being accustomed to what it means to just hear a drum without anything on top of it. And if you happen to be someone who's watched our videos and said, the drums aren't loud enough, why is the talking so loud and then the drums aren't so loud? This is why. Because we're not EQing anything, we're not compressing anything. We could, but then we would not be giving you the prescription that we're trying to give you here, which is, this is what this drum sounds like. This is what this drum sounds like. If we do anything to it, we actually can't just turn it up more because the transients are maxed out. But you're used to hearing them compressed, which makes it seem like it's louder when it's not literally louder on the waveform in the computer. Holy crow, that was a monster monologue. Thank you so much for watching all of that if you made it to the end. Please, if you haven't, like, comment, and subscribe, and click the notification bell below so you can hear about all the new things that we've got going on here. There is plenty of playing in them. They're not all talking the whole time, but we feel like this is really important because of a lot of the comments we're getting and questions we're getting in DMs as well about achieving certain sounds. It's super important. We need to talk about it. Additionally, lots of new things on the Patreon, new cymbal videos, anecdotes, behind the scenes footage, other secret things that we're working on right now that we can't talk about yet. Please head over there, follow the link below, see if there's a tier that works for you, check out all the possibilities, all the options, keeping us going here, keeping us excited about making more videos and making it possible to make more videos. And lastly, if you were to just step away from the idea of what a good drum sound or a bad drum sound is, what do you like your drums to sound like? It can be a recording that you like the sound of. I love Tool records. Those sound like real drums to me. I also love Coltrane records. Those also sound like real drums to me. What drum sound do you love? It can be anything. It can be synthy, whatever. But if we can identify what we love, at the very least, we can start there and we can reverse engineer it and experiment.